back to Breakwood Carpentry. I just finished building this miter stand setup, and there's hundreds of videos online about how to build a miter stand, but there's a few features that I added to this to make it a little more unique. I'm not going to go over the entire process because, like I said, there's tons of videos that show you how to build something like this, but I wanted to make 3 separate detachable pieces due to the length of my miter saw that I have. I have the DWS 779. From front to back, it's 40 inches, which would mean I needed a table to come out about 40 inches. And if I made it one solid piece, that would be one solid 40-inch piece coming into my workspace. So I made 2 16-inch wings that are detachable. Everything is on wheels, so it can all just be pushed back to the wall. So I'm not going to be showing you how I built this specifically, but I wanted to go over something in case you plan on building something similar. I didn't put any cross support in the front or the back of this table that the miter saw is sitting on. The reason for that is I wanted to be able to slide my vacuum completely underneath it and keep it out of my way. So with all the moving back and forth and detaching, you have to be thinking, how do you keep everything in line with each other? So I came up with this method that uses T-nuts on the underside of this support here and a bolt that threads in through the bottom, and it'll come up through the T-nut and lift up this top so that you can level it to keep it in line with the actual miter table. I also bought these bolts online, or these handles online. It came in a pack of 10 that you can just slip the bolt into to make it easy to screw up and screw down. So that is it there. I also bought this 8-pack of these little latches to attach them together. And then the only other really special thing that I bought was a pack of wheels. I ended up buying 3 packs of wheels. They were relatively affordable, and I'll link everything down below so you can find a similar product on Amazon. So for the construction of everything, I ended up using 3/4 inch MDF for the tops, and then it's just 2x4s and screws for everything else. So I'll show you how I built this portion of the stand. Something to keep in mind though is for this DWS saw, the left side only goes to 45 inches or 45 degrees, and the right side goes to 60. So this side goes far enough that I needed to cut a notch out of the top. So you want to keep that in mind if you are building this with a similar saw. So just jumping right into it, just getting all the pieces cut for the lower base portion of the build. These pieces I'm cutting will be assembled into the 4 legs of the table. Here I'm just laying it out, making sure I have everything cut properly. Now I'm just going to go ahead and pre-drill 4 screws into the side of each leg, and then I'll be gluing them together and attaching them that way. It helps if you start all of the screws into the pre-drilled holes, that way you don't have to worry about fumbling around when you're trying to attach everything. You also want to make sure that when you're attaching these 2 pieces together, that you're applying downward force on both pieces so that they stay flush on the back side. This will be the bottom plate that will be screwed to the bottom of every leg, and then the wheels themselves will be attached to this piece. I'm just putting the screws in, and then I'll also glue and screw this to the bottom of the leg. Now when you lay everything out, you want to make sure that the width of the 2x4 is facing forwards or backwards. You don't want the width of the 2 pieces to be facing the front, and you'll see why later. Now I'm just making sure everything is square and attaching it. I didn't use any glue or anything for these bottom supports. Here I'm just marking a notch to cut out of the 2 long cross supports. The reason I'm attaching these pieces sideways like this is so that the bolt has less meat to go through when it's screwing up and raising the top. I just used a jigsaw That was the easiest method for me. You could use a handsaw or whatever would work for you. So this piece will just slot into the legs in the front and the back. To attach these pieces, I'm using Kreg screws at the back side of the notch. These are the blocks that will go on the thinner part of the legs, and for that I'm just using pocket screws. I used a little spacer block to hold up one end, that way I could screw the other end without it falling down. In addition to the pocket screws, I'm also screwing in through the front of the 2x4 and also through the sides. And this is why you wanted the thinner 2x4 facing either forwards or backwards to account for this size notch. If you faced it the other way, the notch would be too big. And when I go to install the handles, it would require the handle to be pushed too far to the left or right. Now that that's all done, I'm laying out the wheels and marking the location. I pushed them all to the furthest outside corner, and then I just went ahead and pre-drilled all of the holes for the screws. These wheels are nice because they come with all the hardware you need to install them. Depending on what kind of casters you buy, a lot of times they don't come with any screws. So you'll want to make sure you either buy screws with a washer or screws that have a large enough head to grab into the wheel itself. Now I'm measuring for the top. It ended up being about 48 inches by 16 inches. And this is just 3/4 inch MDF. I don't have a fancy track saw or anything, so I just clamped a guide down. In this shot, you can see there's only one clamp. The other side, I actually put a screw into the T-track itself that I had there to hold down the other side. Now I'm just marking a notch in the top for where the miter gauge comes out of the miter saw. And then I just use the miter saw to cut the actual notch out. That seemed to be the easiest method. Here I'm just marking out how big I'll need to cut the piece and what the angles will need to be for the little angle there when I cut the frame for this. I didn't really go over it, but it's all pretty self-explanatory. I just keep the saw blade at the same miter setting at the 60 degrees, and that was all I needed to cut that little block out. Here I'm just screwing everything together, pre-drilling, no glue. You can glue if you'd like, but I didn't. Now to attach this to the top, I just am countersinking some holes, and I went back after and sanded flush the countersunk hole because it blows out a little bit. When you do MDF, it raises the hole, so you want to make sure you sand it flush. So now that everything is pretty much measured, cut, assembled, it's ready for the fun part. I'm going to be hammering in T-nuts to the rolling portion. And then I will transfer the mark to these, drill a little hole, and then I will thread the hex nut bolts that I have. So I'm making this little jig here, that way I can drill perfectly straight up and down. So I just have these little pieces of scrap. I'm using a 3/8 inch drill bit, which is the perfect width for the outside of the T-nut to slide into the hole without too much resistance. So I cut these little strips the same thickness as the drill bit, and those will be the inside, and then I will put this in between and brad nail it all together so that it works as a guide for me. So now I'm drilling the hole for the T-nut here, and I spaced it out this far away from the edges due to the notch that's in the bottom from using pocket holes to attach that support. So it's about 7 inches away from the end. And then I just flip the top over and drill a little Forstner bit hole. I probably went down about 1 centimeter or so. Now, depending on the length of your bolt, that'll determine how high you can raise the table. I bought 2.5 inch originally, and they ended up being too short, so I had to get 3-inch bolts. And you want to make sure you get all thread bolts. A lot of times hex head bolts, they only have threads at the top inch, so you want to make sure you buy full threaded bolts. So that is pretty much it. The last step is to install these little clips. These latches were relatively easy to attach. I didn't really do any measuring or anything. I just put it where I wanted it, screwed one piece in, and then lined it up with the other. So with the clamps on, that pretty much concludes this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something from my method of using bolts to raise and lower the table. It's also quite easy to save space with this method because I only have these 16-inch tables. So just like that, you go from 40 inches of space to 16 inches here, about 20 inches there, and it leaves me plenty of room to still walk around and move without the miter stand taking up half the garage. So my next video I'll go over how I install the T-track and make a stop block. So stay tuned for that. Leave a like or comment down below, and thanks for watching.